Marina adjusted her coffee-stained apron and gazed through the window of the small diner in the French Quarter of New Orleans. The afternoon sun streamed through the dusty panes, illuminating the yellowed formica tables where regular customers chatted about sports and politics. It was here, in this modest space that smelled of hot oil and fried dough, that she spent her mornings and afternoons serving small coffees and meat pies to taxi drivers, retirees, and hurried workers. At 28, Marina knew every wrinkle of that place. She knew the sound of the deep fryer that sputtered every Tuesday, the loose tile near the restroom she always warned customers not to step on, and especially, she knew the weight of the bills that piled up at the end of each month. Her mother, Mrs. Celia, had been hospitalized for 3 weeks with heart problems, and the expensive medications consumed every penny Marina managed to save. That Thursday afternoon, a different kind of man walked into the diner. Tall, with broad shoulders and an impeccable suit, he was completely out of place in the simple environment. His leather shoes shone even under the establishment's dim light, and the watch on his wrist probably cost more than Marina earned in a year. He looked around with an expression Marina couldn't quite decipher, something between curiosity and nostalgia. Marina approached with her order pad, wiping her hands on her apron. The man had dark, deep eyes, and when he smiled, something inside her chest stirred in a strange way. "Good afternoon. Welcome to the French Quarter Diner. What can I get for you?" Marina asked with the voice she used for all customers, polite but without intimacy. The man studied the handwritten menu on a chalkboard hanging on the wall. "A meat pie and a small coffee, please. And you can take your time, I have plenty of it." Marina wrote down the order and went to the counter, where Mr. Anthony, the diner's owner, was already frying the day's pastries. While she waited, she couldn't help but glance discreetly at the man. He had chosen a table near the window and was watching the street intently, as if every detail of that humble neighborhood was important. When Marina brought his order, the man thanked her with a genuine kindness that surprised her. Most customers barely looked at her, but this man met her, gaze as if he truly saw her. "Have you been working here long?" he asked before Marina could walk away. "Since I was 19. 9 years now," she replied, not knowing why she was sharing this with a stranger. "You must know the neighborhood well then," he commented, taking a bite of the meat pie. "This place has history, you can feel it." Marina smiled for the first time that day. "It does. Every corner here has a story. My grandmother was born just down that street," she said, pointing to a narrow alley across the way. "I grew up hearing that the French Quarter is the heart of New Orleans, and anyone who knows the quarter knows the soul of the city." The man nodded thoughtfully. "My grandmother used to say something similar. She had a small corner store near here many years ago. I came today because of her, actually. It's been 10 years since she passed, and I wanted to revisit the places she loved." Marina felt a pang of empathy. "I'm sorry for your loss, but it's beautiful that you keep her memory alive like this." They talked for a few more minutes, a light conversation about the neighborhood, about the changes time had brought, about the things that remained the same. When the man asked for the bill, Marina brought it and he paid, leaving a generous tip that made her protest. "That's too much, sir. You don't have to." He smiled again, and Marina realized that his smile had the power to brighten even the grayest day. "For such warm service and a great conversation, it's the least I can do. May I come back tomorrow?" Marina felt her cheeks flush. Of course, the diner is always open, and he did come back. The next day and the day after, and every day that week. He always ordered the same thing, a meat pie and a small coffee, always chose the same table, and always chatted with Marina during the intervals when she could step away from the counter. Little by little, Marina learned that his name was Raphael Cavalcanti, that he worked with hotels, that he traveled a lot, but always returned to New Orleans because it was the city of his heart. Raphael, in turn, discovered that Marina was taking care of her sick mother alone, that she dreamed of one day having her own business, perhaps a small coffee shop with books where people could feel at home. He found out that she read poetry during her breaks, that she loved walking along the Mississippi riverfront on Sunday mornings, and that she had a generous heart that cared for every customer who walked into that humble diner. In the second week, Raphael invited her to dinner. Marina hesitated. looking at her simple uniform and her calloused hands from so much work. "I don't have the right clothes for the places someone like you goes to," she admitted with sincerity. Raphael gently took her hand. "Marina, I don't care about that. I want to get to know you better, and you can come just as you are. I promise it will be a comfortable place." And it was. Raphael took her to a cozy restaurant in the Garden District without ostentation, but with delicious food and a beautiful view of the Mississippi River. That night, Marina felt seen for the first time in years, not as the waitress from the diner, but as Marina, the woman with dreams and stories and feelings. The months that followed were like a dream. Raphael visited the diner whenever he was in New Orleans, took Marina to see new places, and gradually she discovered that the kind man who had entered her life was not just a successful businessman. Raphael Cavalcanti was the owner of one of the largest luxury hotel chains in the country, with properties scattered throughout the United States and in some parts of the Caribbean. But even knowing this, Marina never saw him as anyone different from the man who had smiled at her on that first afternoon in the diner. When Raphael asked Marina to marry him 6 months after that first meeting, she cried with happiness. The ceremony was simple, with only their closest friends and Mrs. Celia, who had improved enough to witness her daughter's happiness. Marina wore a simple white dress she bought at a department store, and Raphael wore the same suit he had on the day he first walked into the diner. Marina's life changed, but she insisted on keeping her essence. She continued to wear comfortable and simple clothes, jeans and cotton t-shirts, worn-out sneakers she loved. Raphael never pressured her to change. On the contrary, he said that was exactly what had won him over, the authenticity of a woman who didn't need diamonds to shine. Now, a year after their wedding, Marina looked out the window of the apartment they shared in Uptown and smiled, remembering that afternoon in the diner. Raphael was on a business trip in Miami, opening a new hotel for the chain, and she missed him. It was then that an idea came to her, an idea that made her smile with enthusiasm. She would surprise Raphael, show up at the hotel where he was staying without notice, and together they could enjoy a few days in Florida. Marina picked up the phone and called Raphael's secretary, asking her to book a room at the Cavalcanti Miami, the chain's flagship property in the southeast, without informing Raphael. It would be a perfect surprise. Marina woke up early the next morning, excited about the trip she had planned. She packed a small backpack with the essentials, comfortable clothes for a few days, her favorite toiletries, and the book of Maya Angelou's poetry she was reading. She glanced at the closet full of expensive clothes Raphael had insisted on buying for her, but which she rarely wore. No, those elegant pieces weren't her. Marina grabbed her favorite pair of jeans, the ones faded at the knees, a simple white t-shirt, and her gray hoodie that had been with her for years. Raphael always said he loved exactly that about her, her simplicity, her refusal to become a different version of herself just because she now had access to a life of luxury. Marina smiled, remembering his words the last time they talked about it. "You are the most genuine person I have ever met, Marina. Don't ever change," he had said, kissing her forehead tenderly. The flight to Miami left at 10 in the morning. Marina arrived at the airport early, went through security without any issues, and boarded the plane feeling a mix of nervousness and excitement. How long had it been since they had surprised each other? Raphael would be so happy to see her show up unexpectedly. During the flight, Marina tried to sleep a little, but the anticipation of the surprise wouldn't let her. She kept imagining the look on Raphael's face when he saw her walking into the hotel. She imagined the days they would spend together in Miami, exploring the vibrant city, walking on the beaches, eating empanadas from the food stalls along the boardwalk. It would be perfect. The plane landed in Miami in the early afternoon. Marina deplaned, feeling the humid Florida heat wrap around her body like a blanket. She took a taxi from the airport and gave the driver the address of the Cavalcanti Miami, a friendly old man who immediately started telling stories about the city. "Ah, you're staying at the Cavalcanti. That's the fanciest hotel in Miami, my dear. They say even famous artists stay there when they come to town. You must be doing well for yourself, huh?" Marina smiled shyly. Actually, my husband works there. I'm going to surprise him. The driver nodded in approval. That's a beautiful thing. A marriage with surprises is a marriage that works. As the taxi drove through the streets of Miami, Marina watched the scenery from the window. The colorful Art Deco buildings, the historic churches, the blue ocean in the distance. Everything was vibrant and full of life. She couldn't wait to explore it all with Rafael by her side. When the taxi finally pulled up in front of the Cavalcanti Miami, Marina's heart began to race. The facade was imposing, a modern construction of glass and concrete that contrasted with the historic buildings around it. A uniformed doorman stood at the entrance, and Marina noticed his critical gaze as she got out of the taxi with her worn backpack on her shoulder. She paid the fare, thanked the driver, and walked towards the hotel entrance. The doorman didn't move to open the door for her, as he did for the other well-dressed guests coming and going. Instead, he frowned and let her push the heavy glass door open herself. Marina entered the lobby and felt as if she had stepped into another world. The floor was polished marble that reflected the light from the crystal chandeliers hanging from the high ceiling. There were strategically placed white leather sofas, enormous vases with exotic flower arrangements, and a water feature in the center that created a soft, relaxing sound. Everything was luxurious, impeccable, intimidating. She suddenly felt small, conscious of her simple clothes, her hair disheveled from the trip, the battered backpack she was carrying. But she took a deep breath and reminded herself that she had every right to be there. She was the wife of the owner of this hotel chain. Rafael had built this empire, and she was part of his life. Marina walked to the reception desk, her sneakers making a small squeak on the marble floor. Behind the high, dark granite counter, a blonde receptionist with perfectly styled hair was typing something on a computer. Her uniform was immaculate, and she wore discreet but perfect makeup. A name tag on her blazer read, Julianne. Marina waited for a few seconds, but the receptionist didn't look up. She stood there, feeling increasingly uncomfortable as Julianne continued to type, completely ignoring her presence. "Excuse me," Marina finally said, trying to keep her voice steady. Julianne finally raised her eyes, and Marina clearly saw the look of displeasure that crossed the woman's face. It was quick, but it was there, a silent judgment based purely on Marina's appearance. "Yes?" Julianne asked in a tone that wasn't exactly rude but was far from welcoming. "Can I help you?" "Yes, please. I have a reservation under the name Marina Cavalcanti," she said, trying to sound confident. Julianne looked back at the computer, her fingers flying over the keyboard with precise movements. A few seconds passed, then a few more, and Marina saw the receptionist's expression shift from indifference to something like restrained amusement. "I'm not finding any reservation under that name," Julianne said finally, her voice laced with skepticism. "It should be there," Marina insisted. "My secretary made the reservation yesterday for today check-in at 2 p.m. Julianne clicked a few more times, making a show of searching thoroughly. "There's really nothing here. Are you sure it was for this hotel? Perhaps it was for another property in the chain." Marina felt the first prickle of irritation. "No, it was for this hotel. I have the confirmation email right here," she said, pulling her phone from her pocket and looking for the message. As Marina searched for the email, she noticed that 2 other employees had approached the reception desk, a young man with glasses and a middle-aged woman with a tight bun, both watching the situation with poorly disguised curiosity. "Here, I found it," Marina said, showing the phone screen to Julianne. The receptionist took Marina's phone with an exaggerated delicacy, as if afraid of being contaminated. She read the email with narrowed eyes, then handed the device back with a cold smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Look, sweetie, I don't know where you got this, but this email could easily be forged. Anyone can create a document like this nowadays, and even if it were real, which it doesn't seem to be, do you really think you belong in a place like this?" Marina felt as if she had been slapped across the face. "Excuse me?" Julianne leaned slightly over the counter, her voice low but perfectly audible. "You heard me. Look at you. Look at this place. Do you really think someone wearing thrift store clothes could afford to stay at the Cavalcanti Miami? This hotel is for people with class, with standards." The young man with glasses and the woman with the bun exchanged glances, and Marina saw their lips curve into restrained smiles, as if they were watching a private comedy. Marina felt her face burn with humiliation and anger. "You don't understand. I am married to Rafael Cavalcanti, the owner of this hotel chain. He's staying here, and I came to surprise him." The words came out louder than she intended, and Marina realized that some guests in the lobby had stopped to watch the scene. Julian, the young man, and the woman with the bun exchanged looks again, and then they started to laugh. It wasn't a loud laugh, but the kind of muffled snickering that was even more humiliating. "Oh, of course you are," Julian said, sarcasm dripping from every word. "The wife of the hotel owner shows up dressed like a vagrant and without a valid reservation. What a convenient story." Marina felt tears of frustration begin to sting her eyes, but she fought to keep them in check. This couldn't be happening. Not in Raphael's hotel, not in the empire he had built with so much hard work and dedication. It was then that a sharp voice cut through the lobby, making Marina turn instinctively. A tall, thin woman was walking towards the reception with firm, determined steps. Her navy blue suit was perfectly tailored, her brown hair was tied in an impeccable bun, and her brown eyes shone with cold authority. The name tag on her blazer identified her as Patricia Almeida, Guest Services Manager. "What is the problem here, Julian?" Patricia asked, her voice maintaining a professional tone but with a hint of irritation. Julian immediately straightened up, like a student being called out by the principal. "This woman is causing a scene, Patricia. She claims to have a reservation, but there's nothing in the system, and when I showed her that her email looks fake, she started making up a story about being married to Mr. Cavalcanti." Patricia turned to Marina, and the look she gave her was one of pure contempt. Marina felt naked under that scrutiny, every detail of her appearance being judged and found wanting. The manager's eyes traveled from the tips of Marina's worn sneakers to her disheveled hair, lingering on the battered backpack she was holding. "Is that so?" Patricia said, her voice heavy with disdain. "And I suppose Mr. Cavalcanti, one of the most successful businessmen in the country, would choose to marry someone who dresses like she just got off a bus at the station?" The words hit Marina like stones. She felt her face burn even hotter, and she noticed that more guests had stopped to watch, some with expressions of curiosity, others with clear disapproval. "Listen," Marina began, trying to keep her voice steady despite the tremor that threatened to take over. "I really am married to Rafael Cavalcanti. If you would just call him or the general manager of this hotel, this would all be cleared up." Patricia crossed her arms over her chest, a posture that made it clear she didn't believe a word Marina was saying. "Oh, of course. I'm going to bother Mr. Cavalcanti, who is in important meetings, because some woman shows up here with a preposterous story. Do you really think we are that naive?" "It's not a story. It's the truth," Marina insisted, feeling desperation rise in her chest. Patricia rolled her eyes and took something from the inner pocket of her blazer. It was a portable credit card machine. "You know what we're going to do? We're going to test your story. If you can really afford to stay at this hotel, we'll run your credit card right now. The nightly rate here is $3,500. Let's see if your card goes through." Marina hesitated. Her credit card was in her wallet, which was at the bottom of her backpack. She had used the joint card she shared with Raphael for recent purchases, but the limit was carefully managed. Since getting married, Marina had insisted on maintaining her financial independence, primarily using her own money and her own card, even when Raphael tried to persuade her to use his resources freely. With trembling hands, Marina opened her backpack and searched for her wallet. She found it among her folded clothes and took out her personal credit card. "Here," she said, handing the card to Patricia. The manager took the card with 2 fingers, as if it was something dirty, and swiped it through the machine. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the soft sound of the fountain in the center of the lobby and the discreet murmurs of the watching guests. The machine emitted her sharp beep. Patricia looked at the screen and a cruel, satisfied smile spread across her face. "Declined. Just as I imagined. This card doesn't have the limit for even half the nightly rate." "That doesn't make sense," Marina said, panic taking over. "It must be some kind of error. Let me try calling the bank. Patricia handed the card back with a brusque gesture. Don't bother. It's more than clear what's happening here. You're a con artist who showed up at our hotel with a fantasy story, trying to get free lodging or maybe pull some kind of scam pass on our guests. I am not a con artist, Marina protested, her voice finally breaking, letting out a choked sob. Julianne, the young man with glasses, and the woman with the bun watched with expressions that varied between malicious satisfaction and amusement. Some guests discreetly pulled their phones from their pockets, and Marina saw camera flashes pointed in her direction. Patricia raised her voice, ensuring everyone in the lobby could hear clearly. Attention, guests of the Cavalcanti Miami. I apologize for the disturbance and the unpleasant scene. This woman is trying to pass herself off as someone she is not, and the situation will be resolved immediately. She then turned to the reception desk and picked up the internal phone. Security, I need 2 guards at reception now. We have an intruder who needs to be removed from the hotel. Marina felt as if the floor was disappearing from under her feet. No, wait, you can't do this. If you would just let me talk to Raphael. Patricia hung up the phone and looked at Marina with absolute coldness. You had your chance. You presented a fake email, a ridiculous story, and a maxed-out credit card. Honestly, woman, if you're going to pull scams, at least be more convincing. I suggest next time you choose a more modest hotel, maybe a motel on the side of the highway. Those are more suited for people like you. The words were like knives. Marina felt the tears finally escape, running hot down her cheeks. She tried to grab her phone to call Raphael, but her hands were shaking so much she almost dropped it. It was then that 2 burly security guards appeared, walking quickly from the side of the lobby. Both were large men with black uniforms that made them look even more intimidating. One had a scar over his eyebrow, the other wore a thick gold ring that reflected the light from the chandeliers. Patricia pointed at Marina with a dramatic gesture. This woman is refusing to leave the hotel after attempting fraud and disturbing the peace of our guests. Escort her out immediately, and if she resists, call the police. The guard with the scar stepped forward, his expression hard and impersonal. Ma'am, you need to come with us, he said in a deep voice that brooked no argument. Please, Marina begged, her voice coming out as a broken whisper. Please, just let me make one call. My husband is in this hotel. He'll explain everything. Patricia snorted with disdain. Enough with the stories. Get her out of here now. The 2 guards advanced simultaneously. The one with the scar grabbed Marina's left arm with brutal force, his fingers digging painfully into her skin. The other guard seized her right arm with equal violence. Marina cried out in pain, her backpack slipping from her shoulder and hitting the marble floor with a dull thud. You're hurting me, she cried, trying to pull away, but the men were too strong. They began to drag her across the polished lobby, and Marina felt her sneakers slide on the marble as she struggled to keep her balance. The pain in her arms was intense, and she knew she would have purple bruises later. All around, the guests watched, some with shocked expressions, others with disapproval, as if Marina were a real criminal being removed. My backpack, Marina shouted, looking back to see her belongings scattered on the floor where the bag had fallen open. Marina's wallet had fallen out of the open backpack, her keys, some papers, and her cell phone scattered across the pristine lobby floor. Patricia looked at the items with an expression of absolute disgust. Throw that stuff in the trash, she ordered coldly, making a dismissive gesture with her hand. It's probably covered in germs. A young bellhop who was nearby, a thin boy no older than 20 identified as Lucas, laughed and kicked Marina's belongings aside, scattering them even further. Another employee, a housekeeper named Fernanda, holding her phone, began filming the entire scene, laughing as she captured Marina's humiliation on video. Look at this is going to go viral, Fernanda commented to Lucas, who smiled. Back. Marina felt the tears streaming uncontrollably now, the public humiliation mixing with the physical pain in her arms where the guards held her. She tried once more to break free, but it was useless. They were dragging her relentlessly towards the glass entrance doors, and Marina could see the doorman outside watching it all with a look of poorly disguised satisfaction. Please, she sobbed one last time, her voice broken and desperate. Someone, please, listen to me. but no one listened. The guests moved away as if she were contagious, some taking more photos and videos, others simply watching, with morbid curiosity. Julianne, behind the reception desk, crossed her arms and smiled smugly, as if she had just solved an annoying problem. The young man with glasses and the woman with the bun were talking in low voices, clearly commenting on the incident. Marina was just a few feet from the doors when she heard the distinctive chime of an elevator arriving. Normally, she wouldn't have paid attention, but something in the air changed in that moment. There was a sudden silence, as if someone had pressed the mute button on the entire world. The security guards abruptly stopped, dragging Marina, their hands still gripping her arms but no longer moving. Marina looked up, confused, trying to understand what had happened, and then she saw him. Raphael Cavalcanti had stepped out of the executive elevator, the one reserved only for senior management and owners. He was impeccable as always, in a dark grey suit, white shirt and navy blue tie. But it wasn't his appearance that had paralyzed everyone in the lobby. It was the expression on his face. Marina knew all of Raphael's expressions. She knew his warm smile when he hugged her in the morning. She knew his focused gaze when he was working. She even knew his frustration when something went wrong in business. But never, in all the time they had been together, had she seen that expression. It was a cold, controlled, and absolutely terrifying fury. His dark eyes swept across the lobby, taking in every detail of the scene before him. His wife being dragged by security guards, tears streaming down her face, her belongings scattered on the floor. Time seemed to freeze. Raphael took one step forward, and that single movement carried so much weight that Marina saw several guests instinctively recoil. "Let her go," Raphael said, and though his voice wasn't loud, each word echoed through the lobby like a clap of thunder. "Now!" The two security guards dropped Marina's arms as quickly as if they had touched a hot iron. She stumbled, nearly falling, but Raphael was already by her side, steadying her gently and helping her regain her balance. His eyes quickly scanned Marina, noting the red marks on her arms, the tears on her face, the state of shock she was in. "Marina," Raphael said softly, his voice a total contradiction to the fury emanating from his entire being. "Are you okay? Did they hurt you?" Marina couldn't answer immediately, just threw herself into Raphael's arms and sobbed against his chest. He held her tightly, one hand stroking her hair, while the other remained firm on her back. For long seconds, Raphael just comforted his wife, letting her calm down a little before dealing with the situation around them. Finally, Marina managed to pull back enough to look into Raphael's eyes. "They wouldn't let me in," she whispered, her voice hoarse from crying. "They said I was lying, that I was a con artist. They hurt me, Raphael. They dragged me and threw my things on the floor." Raphael closed his eyes for a moment, and Marina saw a muscle jump in his jaw. When he opened his eyes again and turned to face the lobby, the temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Patricia had gone completely pale. She was frozen in the same spot where she had given the orders, and Marina saw the exact moment the manager understood the magnitude of her mistake. Julianne, behind the counter, looked like she was about to faint. The young man with glasses and the woman with the bun had disappeared, probably trying to blend in with the other employees. Lucas, the bellhop, was staring at his own feet, as if he wished the floor would swallow him whole. Fernanda was still holding her phone, but she had stopped filming, her eyes wide with terror. "Patricia," Raphael said, and the way he pronounced the manager's name sent a shiver down Marina's spine. "Come here. Now." The manager moved like an automaton, her legs clearly reluctant to carry her closer to Raphael, but with no choice but to obey. She stopped at a safe distance, unable to meet his eyes. "You're going to explain to me in great detail exactly what happened here," Raphael said, his voice low but sharp as a blade. "And I suggest you be completely honest, because I already know part of the story from my wife. If you lie or omit anything, the consequences will be even worse." Patricia opened and closed her mouth several times, like a fish out of water. "Mr. Cavalcanti, we didn't know she was what?" Raphael interrupted, his voice rising for the first time. "Dressed simply, is that what you're going to say, that my wife deserved to be treated like trash because she wasn't wearing designer clothes?" No, sir, that's not it, Patricia tried, but her voice was failing. Then what was it? Tell me. And while you're thinking of your answer, I want every employee involved in this situation to come here as well. All of them. The security guards, the receptionist, that bellhop who kicked my wife's belongings, and especially that employee who thought it was appropriate to film this entire humiliation. Raphael pulled his phone from his pocket and quickly dialed a number. The phone rang only once before it was answered. "Henry, I need you in the main lobby now," Raphael said into the phone, clearly speaking to the regional director. "I don't care if you're in a meeting. I don't care if you're in the bathroom. Drop everything and get down here in 30 seconds, or you'll be looking for a new job too." He hung up without waiting for a response and looked around the lobby. "Was anyone here a witness to what happened to my wife?" he asked loudly, addressing the guests who were still nearby, many of them now trying to discreetly move away. An older woman, elegantly dressed in a beige linen suit, stepped forward. "I saw everything, sir," she said in a firm voice. The woman in the beige linen suit approached Raphael with determined steps. She must have been in her 60s, with perfectly coiffed grey hair and intelligent blue eyes that missed nothing. "My name is Helena Rodriguez," she introduced herself. "I'm a lawyer, and I've been a guest at this hotel for 3 days. I witnessed the entire situation from the moment this young woman arrived at the reception desk." Raphael nodded, his expression softening slightly as he looked at the woman. "Please, Mrs. Rodriguez, tell me what you saw." Helena shot a severe look at Patricia before she began to speak. "Your wife was deliberately ignored by the receptionist for several minutes. When she was finally acknowledged, the treatment was cold and dismissive from the start. I witnessed the receptionist claim there was no reservation, even after seeing the confirmation email. I heard her insinuate that the document could be fake." "And the manager?" Raphael asked, his eyes briefly turning to Patricia, who seemed to be shrinking under the scrutiny. "The manager was even worse," Helena continued without hesitation. "She openly humiliated your wife, made derogatory comments about her appearance, suggested she should go to a cheap motel. She forced her to run a credit card, knowing it would be declined, just to humiliate the young woman further. And when the card was denied, she publicly called her a con artist." Helena took a deep breath before continuing, her voice filled with indignation. "The worst came after. The security guards grabbed this young woman with unnecessary violence. I saw the marks they left on her arms. She was clearly in pain. Her belongings fell and were kicked and ridiculed by that bellhop over there. The housekeeper filmed the whole thing laughing, as if it was some kind of entertainment." Another guest, a younger man with a well-trimmed beard, stepped forward. "I saw everything too, sir. I recorded part of the incident on my phone. If you need the footage as additional evidence, I'm at your disposal." Raphael thanked them with a nod, his gratitude genuine even amidst the fury that still simmered beneath the surface. "Thank you both. Your testimonies will be documented and may be necessary." He then turned back to Marina, who was still by his side, and gently held her face. "Show me your arms, my love," he asked softly. Marina hesitated for a moment, conscious of all the eyes on her, but she trusted Raphael completely. She slowly pushed up the sleeves of her hoodie, revealing deep red marks and the beginnings of bruises where the security guard's fingers had dug into her skin. Raphael touched the marks gently, as if afraid of hurting her further, and Marina saw his jaw tighten again. She could feel the tension radiating from him in almost palpable waves. "That's going to hurt for days," Raphael murmured, more to himself than to her. "I'll have it photographed by a professional. These marks are evidence of assault." It was at that moment that a man in a navy blue suit came running out of the elevator, his face red from exertion and worry. Henry Mendez, the regional director, was in his 40s, with hair starting to grey at the temples and an expression of utter panic as he assessed the scene before him. His hands were visibly shaking as he adjusted his tie, clearly trying to compose himself. "Mr. Cavalcanti," Henry began, his voice failing slightly, "I just arrived from an off-site meeting and was informed of a serious incident. I had no idea. First, we're going to resolve this situation," Raphael said, cutting him off with a raised hand. "Then you and I will have a very serious conversation about how you are managing this property." A conversation that will determine whether you remain in this position or join these employees on the street. Henry's face paled even further, if that was possible. Yes, sir, I understand completely. Raphael turned to face the 6 employees who were now lined up before him, like soldiers awaiting judgment. Patricia, Julianne, the 2 security guards whose name tags revealed them to be Andrew and Paul, Lucas the bellhop, and Fernanda the housekeeper. They all avoided looking directly at Raphael, some studying the marble floor as if it held the answers to the universe, others blinking rapidly, trying to hold back tears that were already beginning to form. "Henry," Raphael said, without taking his eyes off the employees, "I want you to review the security camera footage of everything that happened here in the last 2 hours. I want every angle, every second recorded, and I want it now." Henry pulled a radio from his belt and quickly gave the orders, his voice firm despite his obvious nervousness. A few minutes later, a security technician appeared with a tablet, and Raphael watched the recordings in absolute silence. Marina watched her husband's face, seeing the expressions pass like shadows. The fury building with each scene of humiliation, the pain when he saw the guards grabbing Marina so forcefully, the absolute contempt when he saw Lucas kicking her belongings and Fernanda filming and laughing as if it were a harmless joke. At one point, Raphael paused the video and zoomed in on a specific scene. It was the moment Patricia said to throw Marina's belongings in the trash. He replayed that part 3 times, and Marina saw something new emerge in his eyes, something beyond fury. It was deep disappointment, the kind of disappointment that came from seeing people who were supposed to represent his company acting so contrary to everything he had built. When the video ended, Raphael handed the tablet back to the technician and looked at the 6 employees. The silence in the lobby was deafening. Even the guests who still lingered had stopped moving completely, frozen like statues, all aware that they were witnessing something extraordinary, a moment that would be remembered and talked about for a long time. "When I founded this hotel chain," Raphael began, his voice echoing through the large space with a clarity that made every person present pay absolute attention, "I was 25 years old and I had a vision. I wanted to create places where every person, absolutely every person, felt welcome, where a blue-collar worker would feel as respected as a CEO, where a homemaker would feel as valued as a celebrity." He walked slowly in front of the line of employees, making intense eye contact with each of them. "I established a fundamental principle that was meant to guide every interaction, every service, every moment in these establishments. Dignity for all. All means exactly that. It doesn't matter how a person is dressed, how much money they have in their account, what their background is. Every human being who walks through these doors deserves to be treated with basic respect and dignity." Raphael stopped in front of Patricia, his piercing gaze making the manager involuntarily step back. "You 6 didn't just fail to uphold this fundamental principle. You destroyed it. You trampled on it. You took a woman who came here with a heart full of love, wanting to surprise her husband, and you turned her into an object of public ridicule." Patricia tried to speak, her voice coming out as a strangled whisper. "Mr. Cavalcanti, I apologize from the bottom of my heart. I didn't know who she was. If I had known—" "You didn't know?" Raphael interrupted, his voice rising for the first time. "And that's supposed to make a difference. What didn't you know, Patricia? That humiliating people is wrong, that judging someone by their appearance is despicable, that physically assaulting a guest is a crime? These are not things you need training to know. These are things any decent human being knows from childhood." He turned to Julianne. "And you're saying you would have treated my wife with respect only if you had known who she was. That's not respect, Julianne, that's servility. True respect is treating all people well, not just those you think can harm or benefit you." "But, sir," Julianne tried, tears now streaming down her perfectly made-up face, smudging her expensive mascara. "Please, I have a family. I have 2 small children. I need this job." "And my wife needed basic respect," Raphael answered coldly, with no compassion in his voice. "But you didn't give her that, did you? You treated her like trash from the very first second. When you decided to judge my wife by her appearance, when you decided she didn't deserve dignity because she wasn't wearing expensive clothes, you made a choice. Now I'm making mine." The two security guards, Andrew and Paul, remained silent, but Marina could see the regret etched on their faces. Not that it mattered now. The damage was done, the marks on her arms were physical proof. Andrew finally dared to speak, his voice thick and low. "Sir, we were just following the manager's orders. She was the one who told us to remove the lady." "Following orders doesn't give you license to grab another person with enough force to leave marks that will last for weeks," Raphael said, gesturing to Marina's arms. "You are security guards, not thugs. Your job is to protect guests, not assault them, and you both have enough training to know the difference between a proper escort and violence." Paul lowered his head in shame. "I'm sorry, sir, there are no excuses for what we did." "No, there aren't," Raphael agreed without hesitation. He then turned to Lucas, the bellhop, who was visibly trembling, his 20 years seeming even younger in the face of Raphael's absolute authority. "Sir, I was following orders. The manager said to get rid of the items. I didn't think—" "Following orders doesn't give you license to kick another person's belongings like they're garbage," Raphael said, his voice cutting. "And even if you had received that order, which you didn't, you still had the choice to refuse. You have agency, Lucas. You made a choice. The wrong choice." Finally, Raphael turned to Fernanda, who was still clutching her phone in her trembling hands like incriminating evidence of her own crime. "And you, Fernanda, you thought it was funny to film someone's humiliation. You thought this would be entertainment, that you could post it on your social media and get likes." Fernanda was crying now, sobs shaking her shoulders. "I'm so sorry," she managed to say between sobs. "I didn't think about the consequences. I didn't think I was really hurting someone." "Exactly," Raphael agreed, his voice heavy with disappointment. "You didn't think. None of you thought. You didn't think about what it would be like to be in her shoes. You didn't think about how your actions would affect another person. And now you are going to pay the consequences for not thinking." Raphael turned to Henry, who had remained silent throughout the speech, his expression growing progressively darker with each revelation. "As of this moment, all 6 of these employees are fired, for cause. I want the paperwork drawn up immediately, with all the reasons detailed. Physical assault, public humiliation of a guest, disregard for fundamental company policies, and in her case, he pointed to, Fernanda, invasion of privacy for filming without consent." Patricia took a step forward, her pride finally broken, her once arrogant posture now completely undone. "Mr. Cavalcanti," she said, her voice breaking, "please, I beg you. I've worked here for 12 years. 12 years of dedicated service. I have a mortgage, bills to pay. My reputation in the hotel industry will be destroyed." Raphael stared at her without a shred of compassion. "And in one day, you destroyed all of it," he replied relentlessly. 12 years doesn't give you the right to treat people the way you treated my wife. If in 12 years you haven't learned the basics of human decency, then those 12 years were worthless. Your reputation? Your reputation was destroyed by your own actions, not by my consequences." He paused, letting the words sink in. "And as for your concern about your career in hospitality, perhaps that's for the best. Maybe you should look for another field where you don't have to interact with people, because you clearly lack the necessary skills for customer service." Marina watched everything in silence, still leaning against Raphael. Part of her felt a dark satisfaction in seeing those who had humiliated her being humiliated in turn. But another part, the part that was still the kind waitress from the French Quarter diner, felt a touch of sadness. Not for them specifically, but for the situation as a whole, for the way prejudice and judgment had led to this moment of mutual destruction. Raphael gestured to other security guards who had been called, different from the ones who had assaulted Marina. They were older men, with serious but professional expressions. "These 6 are to be escorted out of the hotel immediately, through the same door they tried to throw my wife out of. Their personal belongings can be collected later under supervision. Now I want them out." The new guards moved forward, but this time there was no aggression, no excessive force. They simply guided the 6 former employees towards the exit, and Marina saw the bitter irony of the situation. Patricia, Julianne, Andrew, Paul, Lucas and Fernanda were escorted through the lobby under the gazes of everyone present. Some guests took pictures, others just watched in silence, and still others talked in low voices, clearly shocked by what they had witnessed. The walk through the lobby seemed to last an eternity. Every step the 6 former employees took echoed on the marble. Every judgmental glance from guests and colleagues was like a knife. It was complete humiliation, a perfect reflection of what they had tried to do to Marina. The difference was, they deserved it. When the 6 employees finally exited through the glass doors, the same doorman who had looked at Marina with contempt now watched his colleagues being removed. His expression was carefully neutral, but Marina saw the moment of recognition in his eyes. He had been a part of it too, with his judgmental stare and his refusal to open the door for her. Raphael noticed it too. "That doorman there," he said, pointing. "What's his name?" Henry checked quickly. "Robert Silva, sir." "Robert will also be placed under review and undergo intensive retraining," Raphael said. "He was my wife's first point of contact with this hotel, and that contact was hostile. If there is any other incident involving judgment based on appearance, he will also be fired." Robert's face paled, but he nodded in understanding, clearly grateful to have received a second chance that the others had not. Raphael then turned to Henry, and the regional director seemed to shrink under his boss's piercing gaze. "Henry, you are on probation starting now," Raphael said, his voice still filled with authority, but slightly more controlled than when he spoke to the fired employees. 3 months to prove you can manage this property properly. During that time, I want a complete review of all service policies. I want mandatory training on respect and human dignity for every single employee in this unit, from management down to the cleaning staff. And I want a crystal-clear zero-tolerance policy on discrimination of any kind. Henry took a small notebook from his inner blazer pocket and began to write quickly, his hands still trembling slightly. "Yes, sir," he replied, his voice firm despite the pallor of his face. "It will be done exactly as you've ordered. I will personally implement every change and oversee every training session." Raphael continued, his list of demands growing. "I also want you to install an anonymous guest feedback system, a tablet on every floor where anyone can report improper treatment without fear of retaliation. And I want weekly reports on that feedback on my desk. Every complaint will be thoroughly investigated." "It will be done, sir." "Furthermore, I want you to personally review the hiring process. It's obvious something is failing if people with these attitudes are making it through selection. Implement situational tests, scenarios where candidates have to demonstrate empathy and respect, not just technical competence." Henry kept writing, filling entire pages with Raphael's directives. "Understood perfectly, Mr. Cavalcanti." Raphael stepped closer to Henry, lowering his voice but maintaining the intensity. "And Henry, if anything remotely like what happened today ever occurs again under your watch, no matter how small the incident, you will be looking for a job elsewhere. There will be no second chance. There will be no explanations. You will simply be out. Is that absolutely clear?" "Perfectly clear, Mr. Cavalcanti," Henry replied, finally meeting Raphael's eyes. "And I can say, sir, that I am deeply ashamed that this happened at my property. Mrs. Cavalcanti deserved VIP treatment from the moment she walked through that door, regardless of how she was dressed. The fact that she was treated this way is my failure as a manager, and I take full responsibility." It was the first display of true understanding and accountability Raphael had heard since he stepped off the elevator. He nodded briefly. "Good. At least you understand the gravity of the situation. Now show me through actions, not just words." Raphael finally turned completely to Marina, and all that glacial fury melted away instantly, replaced by pure concern and unconditional love. He wrapped her in his arms again, kissing the top of her head with infinite tenderness. "Let's go up to the penthouse, my love," he said softly. "You need to rest, take a hot bath, recover from all this, and I'll have the hotel doctor come examine your arms and properly document the injuries." Marina nodded against his chest, feeling exhausted in a way that went far beyond physical fatigue. The humiliation still burned her skin like a sunburn, The cruel words still echoed in her mind on an endless loop. But in Raphael's arms, she was beginning to feel safe again, beginning to believe that maybe she could recover from this. Before they went up, Raphael bent down and began to gather Marina's belongings that were still scattered on the marble floor. He picked up her wallet carefully, checking that nothing was damaged. He picked up her keys, every single one. He picked up her phone, wiping the screen with the sleeve of his own suit. Every item was handled with care, as if they were precious treasures, because to Raphael, anything that belonged to Marina was exactly that. He placed everything back in Marina's backpack gently, straightening the clothes that had been dislodged when the bag fell. Marina felt new tears begin to fall, but this time they weren't tears of humiliation or pain. They were tears of love and gratitude, gratitude for having found a man who not only defended her when needed, but who respected her enough to treat even her simplest things with care and consideration. Helena. Rodriguez, who was still nearby, approached Marina before they got into the elevator. "My dear," she said gently, placing a hand on Marina's shoulder, "you were very brave today, and what I witnessed here tells me you are a woman of exceptional character. Don't let what happened change who you are." "Thank you," Marina managed to say, her voice hoarse. "Thank you for being a witness, for speaking the truth. It means more than you can imagine." "It's always important to speak the truth, especially when we see injustice," Helena replied with a warm smile. "And I'm sure good things will come of this somehow." As the elevator ascended smoothly to the penthouse, Marina leaned against Raphael, feeling his steady heartbeat against her ear. It was comforting, that firm rhythm, reminding her that there were stable things in the world, things she could rely on, and Raphael was the most stable of all. "Henry, you are on probation starting now," Raphael said, his voice still filled with authority, but slightly more controlled. 3 months to prove you can manage this property properly. During that time, I want a complete review of all service policies. I want mandatory training on respect and human dignity for every single employee in this unit, from management down to the cleaning staff. And I want a crystal-clear zero-tolerance policy on discrimination of any kind. "Yes, sir," Henry replied immediately, his voice firm despite the pallor of his face. "It will be done exactly as you've ordered. If anything remotely like what happened today ever occurs again under your watch, you will be looking for a job elsewhere. Is that clear?" "Perfectly clear, Mr. Cavalcanti." Raphael finally turned completely to Marina, and all that glacial fury melted away instantly. He wrapped her in his arms again, kissing the top of her head with infinite tenderness. "Let's go up to the penthouse, my love. You need to rest, take a bath, recover from all this." Marina nodded against his chest, feeling exhausted in a way that went far beyond physical fatigue. The humiliation still burned her skin, the cruel words still echoed in her mind, but in Raphael's arms, she was beginning to feel safe again. Before they went up, Raphael bent down and began to gather Marina's belongings that were still scattered on the floor. He picked up her wallet, her keys, her phone, each item, with care, as if they were precious treasures. He placed everything back in Marina's backpack gently, and she felt new tears begin to fall. But this time, they were not tears of humiliation. They were tears of love and gratitude. In the penthouse, Raphael cared for Marina as if she were made of glass. He drew a hot bath with aromatic salts, brought her comfortable clothes to wear, ordered food from room service when he realized she hadn't eaten anything since morning. He called the hotel doctor to examine and document the injuries on her arms, and when Marina was finally clean, fed, medicated, and wearing a soft robe, they sat on the sofa overlooking Biscayne Bay, and Raphael held her hands in his. "Marina," he began, his voice soft but serious, "I know you love your simple clothes, that you value not being ostentatious. And I love that about you, I always have. But after what happened today, I think maybe we should rethink that. Not for you to become someone you're not, but for safety, so that this never happens again." Marina was silent for a long moment, watching the sun begin to set over the bay, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. She thought carefully about Raphael's words, about the terrible day she had endured, about the purple bruises on her arms. When she finally spoke, her voice was firm, firmer than she herself expected. "No, Raphael, I am not going to change who I am because of what happened today." "But my love," Raphael protested gently, his genuine concern showing in every word. "No," Marina repeated, interrupting him gently but with absolute determination. "Listen to what I'm about to say, because this is important. What happened today wasn't a test for me, Raphael. It was a test for them, and they failed miserably. But if I change who I am, if I start wearing expensive clothes and jewelry just to be treated with respect, then I will have failed too." "Why do you say that?" Raphael asked, genuinely confused. "Because I would be agreeing with their idea that people only deserve dignity if they look like they have money," Marina explained, turning to face Raphael directly. "I would be validating their prejudice. I would be saying that they were right to judge me by my appearance, they just came to the wrong conclusion, and that would be a betrayal of everything I believe in." Raphael looked at her with a mixture of admiration and worry, that internal conflict clear in his dark eyes. "You're incredible, you know that? But you're also stubborn, and that stubbornness worries me. What if it happens again?" "Then it will happen," Marina said simply, "and we'll deal with it when it comes. But I will not live my life in fear of other people's judgment. I will not become a hostage to their pettiness. I learned that today, Raphael. I learned that true courage isn't in hiding behind expensive clothes or conforming to superficial expectations. True courage is in being authentic, even when it's hard, even when it's risky." Raphael pulled Marina closer, enveloping her completely in his arms. "You are the strongest person I know," he whispered in her ear, "and I love you exactly as you are." They held each other for a long time, watching the sun set completely over the bay, the city lights beginning to twinkle one by one like earthbound stars. And it was there, in that moment of peace after the storm, that Marina had an idea that started as a small spark, but quickly grew into a flame. "Raphael," Marina said suddenly, pulling back just enough to see his face, "what if we could make something good come out of all this? Something that could prevent other people from going through what I went through." "What do you have in mind?" Raphael asked, intrigued. And so as night fell over Miami, Marina shared her vision with Raphael, a foundation dedicated to teaching respect and dignity in the hospitality industry. Training programs that went beyond superficial protocol and truly changed how people thought about customer service. An organization that would use Marina's story not as a source of shame, but as a tool for education and transformation. Raphael listened in silence, and Marina saw the enthusiasm grow in his eyes as she spoke. When she finished, he kissed her with passion and pride. "We're going to make this happen," he said. "I'll put all the resources you need at your disposal." In the weeks that followed, the videos of the incident at the Cavalcanti Miami spread across the internet like wildfire. Guests who had filmed the scene from various angles posted them on social media, and the story of the hotel magnate's wife being humiliated in her husband's own hotel captured the imagination of the American public and then the world. Some videos showed the initial humiliation, Julianne's coldness, Patricia's cruelty. Others captured the dramatic moment Raphael appeared, the fury in his eyes, the way he defended Marina without hesitation. And still others showed the employees being escorted out in disgrace, a perfect mirror of the humiliation they had tried to inflict. The response was overwhelming and multifaceted. Millions of people shared the footage, commented on the injustice, and debated fiercely about discrimination based on appearance. Hashtags like "USA Justice for Marina" and "Dignity for All" went viral globally. Articles were written in newspapers and magazines. Television shows dedicated entire segments to the incident. Patricia, Julianne, and the other 4 former employees saw their lives turned upside down in a way they could never have imagined. Their faces were recognized on the street. Their social media accounts were flooded with messages of criticism and condemnation. Potential employers would do a quick Google search and immediately discard their applications. Their actions were being judged publicly by a court far larger than any legal one, and the verdict was unanimous and merciless. But Marina didn't just want revenge or personal justice. She wanted something genuinely good, something transformative to be born from that terrible moment. And so the Dignity for All Foundation was born, an organization that would change not only the hospitality industry, but the way millions of people thought about respect and empathy. With Raphael's full support and initial funding from her own personal money that she had saved over the years, even after their marriage, Marina created an organization dedicated to providing training on respect and empathy for the hospitality and service industries at large. The foundation developed comprehensive and profound educational programs that taught employees, from managers to cleaning staff, about the fundamental importance of treating every person with dignity, regardless of their appearance, background, or apparent social status. The programs were not just theoretical lectures. They were immersive experiences where participants felt firsthand what it meant to be judged by their appearance, role-playing exercises where managers had to put themselves in the shoes of discriminated guests, storytelling sessions where people shared their own experiences with discrimination, and always, at the center of it all, Marina's story as a vivid example of the consequences of prejudice. The first hotel to implement the program was, naturally, the Cavalcanti Miami. Henry personally oversaw every training session, and the transformation was remarkable. Employees who might have once silently judged guests began to question their own biases. The hotel's culture changed palpably, becoming more welcoming, more genuinely inclusive. But soon, other properties in the Cavalcanti chain followed suit. And then something unexpected happened. Hotels from other companies, including competitors, began requesting the training. Marina's story had struck a nerve, and many hotel owners and managers recognized that they needed to do better, that they didn't want similar incidents to tarnish their own reputations, and more. Importantly, they didn't want to perpetuate injustice. Within months, the Dignity for All Foundation was operating in dozens of hotels across the United States. Marina became the organization's spokesperson, sharing her story at conferences, seminars, and workshops. She always appeared dressed in the same simple way that had led to her initial humiliation, consciously turning her appearance into a powerful and undeniable statement. "It's not about the clothes," she would say in every presentation, her clear, firm voice echoing through packed conference halls. It was never about the clothes. It's about seeing the humanity in every person, regardless of how they choose to present themselves to the world. It's about recognizing that dignity is not something that needs to be earned through external symbols of wealth or status. Dignity is an inherent right of every human being, without exception. Her talks were emotional and transformative. Marina shared not only the facts of what had happened, but the feelings, the deep pain of humiliation, the fear when the security guards grabbed her, the desperation of not being heard or believed. And then she would share what came after, the redemption, the transformation, the conscious decision to use her pain as a tool for positive change. Raphael attended every lecture he could, always sitting discreetly in the back of the room, his chest swelling with pride each time he saw his wife turning trauma into purpose. He had fallen in love with the humble waitress from the French Quarter diner, but now he saw a leader being born before his eyes, someone who used her vulnerability as strength, her experience as wisdom. 3 months had passed since that terrible day in Miami. Marina had returned to New Orleans, continued her intensive work with the foundation, and gradually the emotional wounds had begun to heal, leaving not just scars but also wisdom. The physical marks on her arms had faded completely, but the memory of them remained, a constant reminder of why her work was so important. But there was still something she needed to do, one final step in her healing journey that she had been postponing week after week. She needed to go back to the Cavalcanti Miami. She needed to walk into that lobby again, walk across that marble floor, stand before that reception desk. She needed to face the place of her trauma and prove to herself that it no longer held power over her. On a Thursday morning, exactly 3 months after the incident, Marina decided she was ready. She took a flight to Miami without making a big fuss, without notifying the entire hotel staff. She wanted it to be natural, authentic, a true test of whether the implemented changes were real or just superficial. Marina took the same taxi from the airport and smiled when she recognized the driver, the same friendly old man who had driven her 3 months earlier. He recognized her too, his eyes widening with surprise and something akin to reverence. "Mrs. Cavalcanti," he exclaimed, "I saw it all on the news. What they did to you was terrible, but what you did afterward was incredible. My daughter works in a hotel now. She went through your foundation's training, said it changed her life." Marina felt her heart warm. "It's for people like your daughter that I do this work," she said sincerely. When the taxi pulled up in front of the Cavalcanti Miami, Marina took several deep breaths, preparing herself mentally. She was wearing the same faded jeans she had worn that day, the same simple white t-shirt, the same grey hoodie. She carried the same battered backpack, now with a few extra patches because Marina refused to replace it. It was a deliberate, conscious choice, a way to confront her demons head-on. The doorman at the entrance was different, no longer Robert but an older man with kind eyes and a warm smile that genuinely reached his eyes. "Good morning, ma'am," he said with genuine cordiality, opening the door for Marina without the slightest trace of judgment or hesitation. "Welcome to the Cavalcanti Miami." "Good morning," Marina replied, her voice only slightly trembling. "Thank you." She stepped inside, and for an overwhelming moment, she was transported back to that terrible day. The lobby was exactly as she remembered it, all marble and crystal and quiet luxury. The fountain in the center still made that soft, relaxing sound. The white leather sofas were still strategically placed. But this time, as Marina walked to the reception desk, every step was an act of courage, every breath an affirmation that she had survived and grown. The receptionist was a young woman with curly hair pulled back in a high, expressive ponytail. Her eyes were warm and welcoming, and when she saw Marina approach, her smile was instant, genuine, the kind of smile that can't be faked or forced. "Good morning, welcome to the Cavalcanti Miami," she said with real enthusiasm. "My name is Camilla. How can I help you today?" Marina felt something release in her chest, a tension she hadn't even realized she was holding. "Good morning, Camilla. I have a reservation under the name Marina Cavalcanti." Camilla typed quickly on the computer, and her smile grew even wider, if that was possible. "Of course, Mrs. Cavalcanti. It is an immense pleasure to welcome you to our hotel." She paused, and Marina saw a special glint in her eyes, something that looked like a mixture of gratitude and admiration. "If I may say so, ma'am, I participated in your foundation's training program 2 months ago. It was absolutely transformative. It completely changed the way I see my job and the people I serve every day." Marina felt tears prick her eyes, but this time they were good tears, tears of fulfillment and hope. "That means everything to me, Camilla. Thank you so much for telling me. How was the experience?" Camilla leaned slightly over the counter, her expression becoming more serious and reflective. "You know, ma'am, before the training, I didn't think I had any prejudices. I thought I treated everyone well. But the program made me realize how many times I made snap judgments based on people's appearance. How many times I assumed things about someone just because of what they wore or how they spoke. And it made me see how wrong and harmful that was. Now I look at every person who comes to this desk, and I remember, I don't know their story. I don't know their circumstances, and it doesn't matter. My job is to treat them with dignity and respect, period." Marina smiled through her tears. "That's exactly it. You understood perfectly." "No, ma'am, thank you," Camilla insisted with fervor, "for fighting for something so important, for teaching us to do better, for turning your pain into something that is changing lives." As Camilla prepared the check-in with efficiency and care, Marina looked around the lobby with new eyes. She saw other employees at work, all with genuine smiles that didn't seem forced or mechanical. She saw a man in paint-splattered work clothes being served with the same respectful courtesy as a woman in a designer dress at another station. She saw a family with small, noisy children being greeted with genuine patience and kindness instead of poorly disguised irritation. She saw a young man in very simple clothes with an old backpack being helped by an employee who was smiling and chatting as if he were serving a VIP guest. The change was real, palpable, impossible to fake. The lesson had been truly learned, internalized, and transformed into consistent action. And Marina knew, in that transcendent moment, that all the pain and humiliation had been absolutely worth it if it meant that other people would not have to go through the hell she had endured. Raphael had arrived earlier and was waiting for her in the penthouse, respecting her wish to make that first entrance alone. When Marina entered the luxurious suite, he wrapped her in his arms and whispered tenderly in her ear, "How was it, my love?" "It was perfect," Marina replied, her voice filled with emotion but also deep peace. "It was exactly what I needed to see. The change is real, Raphael. It's not just protocol or empty words. The people really understood, they really changed." Raphael held her tighter, kissing her hair, her forehead, her cheeks. "I knew you could change the world," he said. "From that very first day in the diner, I knew you were special." And so, in the same hotel where she had been humiliated and broken, Marina found her complete and total redemption. Not in revenge against those who had hurt her, not in their punishment or suffering, but in the positive transformation her experience had inspired in hundreds, perhaps thousands of people. She had taken something ugly, painful, and traumatic and turned it into something beautiful, meaningful, and lasting. Marina learned profound lessons through that journey. She learned that true strength was not in changing who you were to fit the superficial expectations of others, but in remaining unshakably and authentically true to yourself, even when it was difficult, even when it was dangerous, even when it hurt. And she had learned that from the deepest, most devastating pain could be born the strongest, most transformative purpose. That night, held in Raphael's arms on the penthouse balcony, watching the lights of Miami twinkle and dance like earthbound stars against the dark sky, Marina finally felt a complete and profound peace. The journey had been brutally difficult. It had left invisible scars she would likely carry for the rest of her life, but she had come out on the other side stronger, more determined, more compassionate, and with a meaningful legacy that would continue to impact lives long after the physical marks on her arms had faded completely from memory. And so, the story of Marina and Raphael became much more than just a tale of romantic love or satisfying revenge. It became a powerful story about fundamental human dignity, about the courage required to resist the constant pressure to be something you are not, about the real possibility of transforming personal trauma into collective purpose, and about the extraordinary power one person possesses to make a genuine and lasting difference in the world, one respectful and conscious interaction at a time.